The good old, you know, ready-at-hand definition is that philosophy is the love of wisdom.
Philosophy somehow is seen everywhere, and philosophizing is the technique of analyzing and scrutinizing.
Well, I guess philosophy is about ideas.
Philosophy's ideals are ultimateness, universality, and necessity.
That it gives us a way of thinking about what is the meaning of what we do.
I think about asking fundamental questions about life, human life.
Philosophy is about thinking about how a spiritual being has to be.
It is very much useful for education, educator and those who want to get educated.
Philosophy means to me a systematic, disciplined way of thinking.
At its heart is really just learning to think for yourself.
You know, people often criticize philosophy by saying that philosophy is bullshit. And I actually agree with them. So I'll say yes, philosophy is bullshit in the sense that it is the kind of fertilizer that is necessary for the rest of the academy to grow and grow well.
This is a question which I was asked in a class some 10 years ago in a philosophy class by a student. So why do we do philosophy? And I said, I don't think you can achieve anything by doing philosophy. If you were to look for an instant result, you are thirsty, you pick up a glass and pour a water and drink it, you have solved that problem. Philosophy would begin perhaps rather tortuous to think, why is it that we needed water and where it comes from, and what do I do to analyze what it is, that is to preserve it. So it opens up. In a way, you could also in a very general sense say that philosophy somehow is seen everywhere, and philosophizing is the technique of analyzing and scrutinizing.
Philosophy is the love of wisdom, and it's, I think, about asking fundamental questions about life, human life, and provides a center of gravity, if you will, for intellectual reflection on all kinds of questions one encounters.
But to be a little more specific about it, I think that philosophy begins when you have a question that you have no idea how to answer. And the way you pursue it is through very careful reasoning, explicit reasoning, and attention to argument. So those kinds of skills, that ability to think about problems that are incredibly complex, to break them down into answerable units, and then to pursue those answers with clarity of argument and intent, is, I think, the kind of fertilizer that everyone in the humanities can benefit from.
Philosophy asks with more emphasis the questions, normative questions, less of what is and more of what do we want, what ought to be, what should be done.
The claim, quite an exalted claim, that philosophy and philosophizing could produce some wisdom. So in that sense, philosophy started as a quest for knowledge and wisdom, not just knowledge but wisdom. Philosophers made a distinction, I think, and they tried to do that by asking questions.
My understanding of philosophy is more that it gives us a way of thinking about what is the meaning of what we do. And when it comes to education, we need to think about what is the purpose of education, what knowledge do we teach at school, who authorizes what we teach, why should some children have access to some knowledge while other children don't have the same access. I think philosophy helps us to answer those questions.
I guess it helps you reflect on your own life as well, on the values you hold, why you hold them. Are they good values? And I guess that then helps you to reflect on the community that you live in. And is it a worthwhile community to live in? And helps you to be critical, not in a negative way, but in a way that takes account of historical ideas, and so that philosophy helps you to have this historical perspective, so you're not a prisoner of the present. One thing about ideas is that they have a historical provenance. And so one thing about philosophy is that it gives you a sense of history. It makes you realise that human beings haven't just lived on the planet in the 20th and 21st centuries, that it goes back a long way to Plato, and of course Indian philosophy goes back a long time as well. So it gives you a sense of identity, a sense of continuity with those who've gone before you.
I guess philosophy gives a way to think and way to come out of your everyday mundane problematics, which we usually get entrapped into. So in order to come out of those at a personal level, I think it is first of all very important to start thinking. And to start thinking again doesn't mean to start thinking in a very vague manner or in a very uncontrolled manner, but to do it in a proper way. And philosophy in a way gives it that way, that method to think in a manner that would bring some coherence in your thoughts, and especially for teachers who are situationally or situated in circumstances of a lot of problematics and complexities. So I think that is one way philosophy of education per se is of great help.
Because without self-reflection, it is almost difficult. It is very easy to analyze others, to pass comments on others. When we define and ask these questions, who am I? What will happen to me? What am I going to do next? Both in the transcendental sense and more importantly in a modern sense, in our existential sense, if we can ask these questions, perhaps philosophy would have made things fruitful.
As I said, how do you confront seemingly intractable problems? How do you break it down into answerable units? How do you use reason and argument in a way that's publicly demonstrable and publicly shareable and publicly accountable to actually pursue your question?
People have a misunderstanding of philosophy as a entirely abstract, otherworldly discipline. But in truth, philosophy is quite useful in everyday life, in that at the heart of philosophy is a certain skill set. I would describe it as the skill set of being able to comprehend and understand arguments. And this can be over buying a car or which candidate to vote for, to be able to look at various attempts to get you to do one thing or another, or to buy something or other, and be able to think critically about that and make up your own mind. I think philosophy has gotten a reputation for being highly abstract and inaccessible to the layperson, but that's because philosophers, when they talk among themselves, tend, as any group of specialists, to use a specialized vocabulary, and also with certain issues that people are not familiar with until they become a part of a community. It makes it seem like it's quite a difficult and otherworldly subject, but at its heart is really just learning to think for yourself.
The second thing I see about philosophy is, paraphrasing a little bit on Dewey, that philosophy's ideals are ultimateness, universality, and necessity. Now, ultimateness doesn't mean finding the ultimate knowledge which is never going to change. It means that digging deeper into your system of assumptions and beliefs. So, this may not be the truth, eternal truth for all times to come, but philosophy always tries tries to hit the rock bottom of belief systems among the people who are part of the discourse. The second thing is that philosophy has a thrust for universality, and by universality here is meant that which is true for all human beings in that simple manner. Now, this is not that philosophy does not respect the difference between people or communities or societies or various kinds of nations, but they would see those differences and would like to formulate still in a manner, in a more generalized manner, that all these aspects become special cases of that generalized formulation. The third thing philosophy has an ideal is it would like to see which part of our knowledge or belief system is logically necessary. So, it asks necessary, there is a difference between necessity and universality. Universality is among all human beings, necessity is in all possible logical worlds.
I think that we must make a distinction between philosophy of education and educational thought. Formal educational thought, in some ways you could say that the very famous stories and writings about education in all traditions. You have of course, one of the most famous is in the Greek tradition, Plato and Aristotle, and in the Indian tradition there are various different attempts to set up certain forms of how to educate. So one way to understand philosophy of education is not to say that it is a branch of philosophy, but a branch of the exploration of education, where certain philosophically important questions are asked by educators about the process of education itself. In some ways, philosophy of education is important for the teacher because it helps me ask questions, and that might be more important than the clear answers it might provide, but it can give me some answers too.
In education, I think we need philosophy of education in order to balance the fragmentation of the educational sciences. The whole of education, which in the end is about one child improving their life, is fragmented into many different clusters, and people don't talk to each other. So they also don't think of education as a whole, they think of their particular subfield. Philosophy of education provides a counterbalance to that fragmentation because it encourages us to always come back to the main questions. What is education for? How can we improve it? How does it fit in with our overall societal goals?
Teachers need a reason to keep on doing what they do, and having an interest in ideas helps you to motivate yourself. So that's the first thing why philosophy might help. The second thing is that I think it helps you to reflect on your own classroom practice.
There are two issues. One is what knowledge should we teach in school, and the second one is how should we teach it. And the teacher is obviously the person who is concerned with both. The teacher must make decisions about what knowledge is to be taught, and the teacher must decide how to teach that knowledge so that all children have access to it. So philosophy encourages teachers to think about what they're doing. There's a real danger that a teacher takes a textbook and says, the textbook has the knowledge, I'll simply teach from the textbook, without any concern about what knowledge is in the textbook. Is it important knowledge? How should it be taught? How to arrange the knowledge? Should it be arranged from the simplest to the most complex knowledge? Now the teacher needs to know what the knowledge is in order to be able to put it, to arrange it into an order that children can understand.
In education, it has been shown, as many of the speakers in this conference have alleged, that students, when they begin to think for themselves and become inquirers as opposed to just consumers of information, they really begin to learn. And so philosophy, in a way, is really at the heart of teaching in both the Indian tradition and in the Western.
Now, what philosophy does in education or its legitimacy, that might depend on several things. Many of the philosophers of education claim that it's not possible to do education without having some philosophical assumptions about human being, the kind of life one wants or good life, and the kind of society we want to create, and relationship of knowledge with that society, etc. It's impossible to do education without asking these questions. So, people may have some assumptions in their mind and they may not be aware of them, or they may be aware of them, but they may not think that alternative assumptions are possible, and therefore, they might think that philosophy is useless. What philosophy does is consistently pushes people to articulate these questions, articulate answers to them, take into account all other answers which are available, and try to build rigorous argument for accepting this or that. And also, as a slogan, one can say, one can't even deny the legitimacy of philosophy without being philosophical.